Good afternoon, all of you transfer specialists and hangers-on in the transfer world. As you know, we're ending National Student Transfer Week today, and so we are really happy and congratulate you all for participating and contributing to transfer throughout Ohio. We started the week with a panel of students who had transferred, who were transferring, and that was such a great way to celebrate their efforts, and I was really excited about it. We all know, I'm sure, that transfer doesn't end 1 week in October. It continues. It's a day-by-day, hour-by-hour effort, and it's one that I think we're all proud to contribute to. This webinar series, which we started this year as a result of COVID, will also continue. Our next webinar is going to be November 13th, and it will be developing high impact pathways. So I just wanted you to reserve that day, November 13th, 12 to 1. And again, we have Jonathan, who will help us with the technology here today, and he will also be on that panel November 13th. I am first going to introduce our panel specialists today. Oh, before I do that, I'm sorry. Please remember that if you have any questions to ask, enter them in the chat, and then Jonathan will handle those at the end of this session today. So I really am grateful to him for helping us to field the questions. The first panelist is Rebecca Donatelli. She is the Community College Regional Manager at Franklin University. So Rebecca, would you wave? Yes, yay. Next, we have Kimberly Lydell, who is the transfer specialist at Cuyahoga Community College. She just shared with us that the new mascot at Tracy is a triceratops, and I think that's so cute. Robyn Marrufo, who is the manager of transfer admission at the University of Toledo. And I think I've been on webinars with Robyn in the last week, so welcome back, Robyn. And then we have Cassandra Tenorio, Cassie, who is the academic advisor at Lorain County Community College. And I sadly do not know what their mascot is. And finally, no, it's not finally, we have Tracy, who is the coordinator of transfer admissions at Bowling Green State University. And we have Mary Whitt, who is a giant in the transfer community, but she's not a giant-sized person, but here she is, and she is the coordinator of transfer and articulation at Columbus State Community College. And finally, we have Chaka Wilson, who has a new job as program manager of the Dr. James L. Moore III Scholars Program, Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And welcome, Chaka. So I'm so happy to have these wonderful panelists to field questions. Our questions will be in areas such as enrollment and recruiting, engagement, belonging, student success, online, financial aid, COVID challenges. So essentially, how do we make those transitions that the students make smoother and easier for them? The first group of questions are rather general, just getting our footing. How would you describe the ideal transfer transition? So Robyn, how would you describe an ideal transfer transition for our students?
Well, thank you everyone for being here. And Deb, thank you so much for organizing all of this, and Jonathan for supporting it. I would say that the ideal transition for a transfer student is one of connectedness and early intervention. So we find that students are the most academically and self-awareness prepared if they've had connections to a four-year school, whether it's ours or another. We would like to see a student be well connected to individuals and or departments at their own institution so that they can then ease those transitions into our institution. So I find often that I am referring students to, for instance, I work with the Owens Community College most closely at this point, and I find myself working with their advising transfer information and what do their advisors want to do. How can we connect you to their career service? And making sure that a student is making great use of their community college resources, and then knowing that we have those resources and probably more even to help them make their transition. So really early intervention, the earlier we can connect with a student, the better, but hopefully making sure that that student is well connected to their current institution and making use of those resources so that they're better prepared to come to us. So
thank you so much. So the community college, the university working together to help the student make those connections. So thank you. I would also like for Kim Lydell to answer that question. Kim?
Sure, thank you. In terms of the ideal transfer transition, it definitely starts with the student deciding that they want to transfer, and hopefully at least a year or so prior to transferring. Granted, there are students who will wait a little bit later, but we will still work with them, even if it's their last term at Cuyahoga Community College. Of course, with this, when it's within their first year, it gives us enough time to be able to evaluate all of their options, make sure they're taking the right courses, and be able to help them connect with their top options. So it's really an opportunity for students to connect sooner and make sure that they're successful before they land to that four-year school. But then, of course, making sure that student feels welcome, feel part of that campus community, and they're on the right track to successfully complete their bachelor's degree there.
Thank you so much. It is so important for them to decide, but also for the colleges to know about that decision and to help them with all of the decisions that follow that. And finally, I'd like to ask Allie Tracy what she does, what she thinks of as the ideal transfer transition at Bowling Green.
You know, Deb, the only thing that I would add is it really has to be customized to the student, right? And so we really pride ourselves in taking a custom tailored approach to each and every student. And most certainly it's about removing barriers because we know transfer students can come with barriers. And so starting as they mentioned, early as possible, that early intervention is super helpful. As soon as we can get quick, efficient responses and answers to these students, the more connected they'll be with our institutions, and also just making sure that it is an effortless transition, effortless transfer of credit as smooth as possible, the advising and registration process, and as Robyn and Kim both alluded to, getting them connected on both ends. We want them to feel like they're a graduate of both institutions and that they have that loyalty and pride for both of those institutions when they finish their degrees.
Great. I just thought about something that we could provide. Sweatshirts, t-shirts that are divided in half. So Bowling Green on one side and the community college on the other. I like that idea. One of our student panelists mentioned that she started planning when she was still in middle school. And I thought, wow, that is really great to have that kind of a trajectory, that kind of bead on your career. The next question is about transfer advising. Could you define transfer advising and tell us whether it's different for prospective transfer students and transfer students after enrollment? So basically, is it different for the community college transfer advising versus the entering transfer students at the university? And Allie Tracy, could you take that question?
Sure. I would say we kind of split the way we consider advising when we talk about connecting with the student who's at another institution, whether it's a community college or another four-year institution. We refer to that as kind of the transfer advising experience, right? So it's that preliminary, pre-advising, external advising, whatever you call it. That's where we're trying to craft transfer-friendly courses and really craft a plan similar to the guaranteed transfer pathways. We really want them to understand, what does a C-tag mean? What does an OTM mean? What does a tag course mean? So we're covering those, but also really giving them an equivalency guide. If we can lay out, BGSU updates their transferology every single week, so we know it's accurate, but we've also crafted equivalency guides for every community college in the state to say, hey, here are the gen eds at this institution, here's exactly how they transfer. We try to lay it out as simplistically as we can for these students, but certainly academic advising looks a little bit different when you get to the university, because that's when these students will get paired with either a faculty advisor or their college academic advisor. And at BGSU, we kind of take a different approach. It's not just degree completion and, you know, yes, we're working to get you to graduation as quickly as possible, but we also take a life design approach to this. And so we really want to look at the student as a whole and spend that time deciding how is the student's time best spent when they get to the university based upon what they've already done, the experiences they're bringing, what going beyond their academic experience, what does their personal journey look like? What does their purpose look like? What do they want their life to look like, you know, as they're graduating and beyond?
Thank you so much, Allie. It sounds as if you make that pathway clear to them, and I know that takes a lot of energy creating the pathways, those equivalency guides, but it also takes constant communication with the student to keep them on that path. So I would also like to ask that question of Cassie Tenorio. Cassie? How do you see the advising roles before and after transfer?
So I think from the community college level, it's definitely like proactive advising. It's getting with the students early. Luckily at LCC, we're on a pathway advising. So if a student's interested in business, I know right away, what's your goal? Are you wanting to get a bachelor's degree? Okay, the Associate of Arts probably will fit you better. So proactive advising, setting goals with those students. And then it's a big piece of communication, communicating with the student. What does transfer mean? What do you need to know? Like Allie said, what is a tag course? What is the OTM? And making sure they understand all of that. And then also communicating with the four-year schools, building those relationships with their transfer specialists and advisors.
Great. So you kind of lay the foundation, but then the four-year partner builds on that foundation to help the students. Thank you so much. The next question is also a general question. Out of the many transition issues, what do you think affects transfer students the most? What do you hear over and over as something that is important to your students? Mary?
Well, when I was thinking about this question, I think there were two things that I was thinking about. One is the culture and the fit. I think, especially here in Columbus with Ohio State in our backyard and the majority of our students transferring to Ohio State, I think there's a perception versus reality problem. I think a lot of students perceive Ohio State in one way, but then when they enter Ohio State, using that as an example, it's a completely different, I think, place than what they expected. So I know that when Chaka and I were working together, we really wanted the students to understand that and see, like, step out of what is OSU besides what it is in Columbus. Like, how does it fit for you culturally? Like, when you go up there, you're going to feel comfortable. And, you know, a lot of our students have a belonging thing. I think all of the community colleges here represented today could say that they have a lot of students who feel very comfortable at their community college. They've learned to love it. Maybe they weren't into school to begin with, and so they feel very comfortable there. And it's very hard to leave. It's very hard to leave the school. It's very hard to leave geographically the area. So they're very worried about belonging on the other side. And what always gives me trouble when I'm talking to is hearing some of those faculty perceptions that there's still that stereotype out there that transfer students are less than. I don't think it's any of us here in this room, but really counteracting what students experience once they get beyond that admissions process and how they feel, and trying to make them aware that, there are going to be some differences that they're not expecting. It might not all be rainbows and unicorns when they get there. So, just thinking about that, like really looking at the perception versus reality and that fit when they get there.
Great, thank you so much. And I know that that effort of helping the students to understand themselves and the culture, that's so important, but it's also so time consuming. Chaka, you have been Mary's counterpart at The Ohio State University, which she just was telling us that has some comfort issues. I know you're now in a new role, but when you were working students who were transferring into OSU, what did you find? What did you hear over and over again about their issues?
So I'm fortunate in my new position. I'm still working with students from Columbus State. This
Oh,
time just actually at Ohio State instead of working with them where they're at Columbus State. So just a little background, as Mary mentioned, I worked closely with her with students who are transferring from Columbus State to Ohio State. And one of the bigger things that we noticed was the credits transferring, making sure that students are actually in the right program at Columbus State that will actually transfer, quote, seamlessly to Ohio State. Now, they're not all pretty, but a lot of them are. And Mary does a really good job working with Ohio State staff to make sure that those credits will transfer. The goal is that proactive advising, that the early work with the students to make sure that the students know what they want to do when they even get into Columbus State. So that was one of my goals while I was working closely with Mary, was to make sure that students coming into Columbus State had an idea of what they wanted to do when they left. And that's hard for some students to consider early on, especially when some students just wake up and decide they want to go to college and they haven't necessarily thought that far ahead. But that is something that is really helpful if students actually have an idea early and then set that path early, and then also knowing if they change their mind, what to do so that they can get on a good path once they've changed their mind. Another thing I would say is definitely that financial difference. Columbus State fees are way different. They're like almost clear cut at Columbus State. You know what you're paying for and how much it's going to, you can basically budget that out pretty well. When you go to OSU, there's a lot of different fees that students are not familiar with. And they transfer from Columbus State to Ohio State, not necessarily always knowing those differences. So again, part of the things that I did in the programs that I worked in at Columbus State is encourage those students to talk to financial aid early, to not just know their eligibility at Columbus State, but in regards to financial aid, the financial aid world, what that might look like at Ohio State. And budgeting early, meaning I'm budgeting as a Columbus State student so that I make sure I have funds when I go to Ohio State. Because students will get to Ohio State and then they'll realize that the tuition is so different and not be able to pay their tuition, which means they're not starting. It's not that they're not ready academically, they're not ready financially. And so we want to make sure that students are aware of that early. And then the third difference that I would say would be orientation. So Mary laughs at that. She's like, I know what you mean. So at Ohio State, it's a large institution and they have a lot of time and effort and energy into the new student orientation. So students coming straight out of high school, and then transfer students, they get an orientation, it's just not as robust. However, we're learning that students who are transferring into the university also need guidance. They need that acclimatation, like they don't know about the CAB system. They don't know, as Mary mentioned earlier, you know, that culture shift. And just coming from down the street, students have a perception, but some students have never stepped foot on the campus. But it's just because they chose OSU because they know it. And they know it, not necessarily being there, but because of football or basketball and things of that matter. So orientation is a big difference between an incoming freshman versus a transfer student. So just trying to orient those students when they do transfer to OSU to make it, to improve that transition, not just the transfer. The transfer is more so the process, the transition would be more the experience. So those are just things that I can think of that I hear a lot of differences.
Thank you so much. Again, obviously the importance of the advisor getting to know the student. I like your comment, your last comment about orientation, because we heard that from our student panel too, that some of the student panelists thought that they were too sophisticated for orientation, but then found out that they were really missing a lot of information when the university didn't provide it. Our next set of questions is about enrollment and recruiting. Could you tell us about the outreach you do for aspiring transfer students? Kim, would you take that?
Sure. I know I can talk a little bit about how we support students as far as that transition out from Tracy. We recently have been more supportive of our recruiters as far as any of the students who are transferring in and helping them to navigate some of the things that are needed as far as making sure they have transcripts and such submitted into the college. For those students who, again, are transitioning out from our college as far as helping them with getting connected, it definitely goes back to what Mary mentioned, having that fit, making sure that they get a chance to talk to the admissions counselors, getting a chance that they do, we have virtual table visits now, but when we were doing a lot of things in person, there was the opportunity to connect at table visits just to get general information. We have external advising available to our students. We also host tours. We just had to be a little bit creative given the current circumstances, but we try to find different ways for students to connect so they really get to get to know school. So students won't have the situation of, oh, I want to go here, and then when you get there, realize it's not a fit. Rather hear them say, let me go back to square one and let's start again to find what's going to be a good fit for me.
Thank you so much, Kim. Could you comment on what you do at Toledo, Robyn, related to outreach?
Sure. We reach out to students in a variety of ways, and it can include networking with current CCP students at different institutions. It can include working with faculty and other staff. It can include working with Phi Theta Kappa chapters. So those are some of the ways that we reach out and connect with students. Once we have someone on our radar, we really try to make sure that they are connected as personally as possible to different individuals on our campus. So whether it's, we have a law school, so let's get them going to meeting with people in the law school and then meeting with pre-law advisors. If they're wanting to go to med school, let's get them connected to our pre-health advising and making sure that they have those personal connections well before they get here, so they feel very comfortable being able to talk to those individuals when they're here. So really it's a matter of, asking them, what do you need? What do you want? We try that to connect with them early enough so that we can get a sense of, what do you want this degree to do for you? What do you want your college experience to do for you? And so once we start asking those questions, we can tailor it to what they're really interested in and what they really need from their own campus and from us.
I imagine that the students really appreciate those questions, Robyn. Thank you. Rebecca Donatelli, how about at Franklin? What kind of outreach are you doing to bring students into Franklin? And I know that Franklin relies a great deal on this steady stream of transfer students. So what are you doing?
Well, before we were doing the typical, table visits, in-person events, meeting with instructors and faculty and staff, but we have changed it up, of course. Everything has become virtual and everybody realizes that. But so what we're doing now is we're hosting, consistent weekly, sometimes twice a week, open Zoom hours, advising appointments. And then in addition, doing like the hallway visits virtually. I know Tracy offers that now, which is great. We're doing virtual open houses and then virtual classroom presentations. It is a little bit different now because with an online course, sometimes students aren't set to a specific time. So you can't just pop into the classroom anymore. But I have done presentations for classes through Zoom, and it's been pretty good. The students have really adapted in a way that, not that I didn't think they could, but for such a quick transition, they've done a great job. So all of those things, we do host major specific events, once a month, having just a business open house and inviting all business students and just trying to make it a little bit more personal versus just a general open house.
Yeah, great. I know that we're working with you for some of that outreach, and I appreciate all of your efforts to connect with our students. Next question is also related to enrollment outreach. Related to recruitment plans, do you have any recruitment plans for student leadership into transfer student organizations such as Tau Sigma. Robyn, are you still with us? Can you answer that question? Thank you.
I am still here. Sorry, we had a student come in.
Yeah, I understand.
Sorry. Tau Sigma is not something that's active on our campus right now, but what we really do is try to connect students to their different academic disciplines in terms of any honor programs or if they're special interest groups. So for instance, if they're an accounting student, we connect them to our accounting student chapter. If they're wanting medicine, we connect them to all of those different various chapters in biology, in chemistry. There's one just for pre-med. So we have different groups that we refer to that are academic, but we also refer to our Office of Student Involvement. So we connect to basically any one of 350 to 400 different student organizations as well. So I'm working on getting a specific transfer chapter at this point, but so far we don't, right this moment, we don't have one, but that will be coming.
For us as well, one of the students, the University of Dayton student, told all of us that she had created her own transfer club, and she did it because she saw the students who were needing that kind of connecting and just information. So I was so impressed with that. I don't know. So you be sure to let me know how yours goes, and I'll let you know whether we're successful too, because as you know, at a community college, students are really, really pressed for time. Most of them are working part-time, full-time.
Chaka even mentioned, you know, they think that they know OSU, for example. They think they might know Toledo or Bowling Green or Mercy or Lourdes, et cetera. So we try to make sure that they feel comfortable, but I think that if we could identify specific transfers so that transfers can share their transfer experience, because they don't necessarily know, and they don't necessarily know what is available to them. So we try to open their eyes to all the options that they have available to them and how that can help them in the future.
Yeah, it's hard to, you know, communicating period is hard to get people's attention. It doesn't matter whether it's students or faculty, staff, communication is important. We're moving into an area of student success. So the first question will go to Kim Lydell. What equity considerations inform the transfer process at your school?
Well, I kind of look at it from two perspectives. So the first one is just seeing about when we work with a four-year school, are they accepting with students, and kind of look at how students are treated at the front door. What type of information is posted on the website regarding admissions? Is there even a section for transfer admissions? And thankfully not with many schools from Ohio, but when we have students who are looking out of state, sometimes the school may not have a section dedicated to transfer students. Even information about financial aid, whether it's transfer scholarships or the process that transfer students need to go through. And even how they address the question of, do you do unofficial evaluations? We understand based on each individual university's policy, they may or may not be able to do that, but it's more of the answer of how you address it. So if a school says, no, we do not provide that, however, here are some suggestions to kind of prepare, that at least gives a underlining that you may be a transfer friendly institution versus some universities who say, no, the student will just need to apply and submit official transcripts. Thank you. And that's usually how the response would go. So that's usually one way to think about the equity in terms of just understanding the barriers and just, do you have the appearance, at least the effort of being a transfer friendly institution? We also do have some discussions, and we've been having this at Tracy in terms of inclusion and equity as far as with the students and even how our staff works together. Actually, all of our transfer centers throughout our college we're preparing to do a couple of diversity trainings, and many of these trainings, not just with our individual staff, but we are having one training that involves other departments that have some type of touch point with transfer, whether it's our counseling center that deals with the academic advising, including some of our articulation transfer folks. We're just going to talk a little bit about diversity in terms of how we can best support students in the transfer process, and even how we work together addressing issues of biases and things like that. And of course, helping students overall with understanding how all of this can play in finding the right transfer match. And again, it all goes back to making sure that students feel welcome and feel accepted being at the college that they transfer to.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your comments. It harkens back to that conversation we had a little earlier about knowing the culture, knowing yourself, how you fit in, but also it calls for all of us to do some reflection about how we are communicating to students, how we seem to students. And I think all colleges and universities are spending much time on that effort. Next question related to student success is the successful transfer of credits. And so I'd like to know what Columbus State does, Mary, to make sure that your credits transfer to the universities and apply to the right program. That's the crucial step.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we're not the ones doing the transferring. So we try to work within the constraints of the colleges that we work with. But one thing when I started this work that I wanted to do was to, instead of just getting an equivalency guide from the four-year institution and just using that, I wanted to use it as like a starting, bet or something to really deep dive into that and look for ways that we could maybe come together, bring the faculty in, bring syllabi in, bring different things in to get some of our four-year partners to look differently at some of our classes and some of our programs. I think too often, we all just look at each other's catalogs, and that only gives you like half the picture of what's there and what's doable. One thing that I've learned is that a lot of our faculty, when we say to them, you have this math course in your program, it's great for students who want their associate's degree to be terminal, but would you be willing to substitute a higher math class or a higher science class or a different humanities class or something like that? And we have so many choices here at Columbus State that's really easy to do. So we're lucky in that respect. But the faculty have been so willing to meet us halfway. And we've even had, when we've talked to our faculty about, hey, there's this class that you have in your program, it's really not doing anything transfer-wise, and could we substitute a different elective here? And they're like, of course, we'll do that. We want our students to go on. They realize the benefits of transfer. So really, really working with our faculty, working with our partners, and making sure that our students are getting the most bang for their buck, I think is the most important thing. And really, really what we've been trying to do, and Chaka touched on this earlier, is reaching our students earlier. So I have a program during orientation. I also do programs during high school visit days. And in both spaces, I talk about you need to do tandem advising. You need to think about seeing your Columbus State advisor, and you need to think about reaching out to these institutions the minute you arrive at Columbus State, because that's going to give you the best outcome when it comes to transfer and applicability of credit. So really, really trying to bring them together a lot earlier, especially if they know. Like if they know they want to go to Bowling Green, they should be talking to them from the beginning, that kind of thing.
Thank you. I love this idea of bringing the faculty into the conversation, because that also changes the culture, but it's another really important connection for the students too. So I'd also like for Allie to answer that question. So Allie, what do you do to ensure transfer?
I appreciate Mary so much. I think it's about collaboration. Like if a student is at Owens Community College looking at BG and Toledo, that's very plausible. And so we want to make sure that Robyn's team and my team are giving them options that are going to work for both schools. We want to talk about reverse transfer to get you, if you don't finish your program because you have to get to us sooner, if it's in the student's best interest, we want to make sure they're educated about all of that. So I think it's absolutely about collaboration, but the faculty to faculty is so critical. There's power in that because we know faculty own this curriculum. They're very protective. They want to make sure the integrity is held, which is fine, but it's just when we're able to share with them, like, you don't realize how this impacts these transfer students and how many more transfer students would complete your programs if you would just sit down and have maybe some compromise. And so I know we're doing that right now with some of our programs, but what I appreciate is our registrar office. They just don't get enough credit. They do all this work behind the scenes, but they really are taking it seriously now because they know the future is transfer. And so our registrar is doing some auditing to see, okay, what are the most frequent courses that are not being accepted at BG? And let's flag those and figure it out. And so I think they're really taking it one level deeper versus just accepting, oh, this department's never going to accept this class. Well, why? You know, I think faculty changes, there's turnover, programs can change and adapt, state licensures, accreditation. So there are so many moving parts to this, which is why collaboration and communication, I think, is so important.
I totally agree. Thank you so much. I think it is important to remember the important role that the registrars play. Cassie, how about you? How at Lorain Lorain County Community College, how do you ensure transfer of credits?
So I think from a student service lens, being an advisor, we really try to equip our students with tools to make them successful. So like I said, we start the conversation early. We do use those transfer guides if they're available, but we also show a student, okay, what are you interested in? What school, what program? Okay, how do we find their curriculum online? Now, how do we use transferology to see how that will transfer over? So equipping them with tools. We have a transfer planning worksheet, which we actually got from Tracy and kind of adapted it a little bit, where we have the student also, you know, Chaka mentioned earlier, it's not just the transfer credits that are important. It's also, you know, helping them with that transition. So that has not only how many credits can you transfer, what's the maximum that they'll take, right? What's the residency requirement, and teaching them that verbiage, but also the financial aid piece. How much is the tuition? Is it a per credit hour? You know, is it a flat rate for semester? And that looks a lot different when you're coming from a community college and you have the Pell Grant, you know, and you go on further with financial aid. So preparing them for the transfer credits, giving them the tools, and then giving them the tools too for the financial aid piece.
Thank you so much. As you mentioned, the things that students need to understand, you can certainly see how many barriers we have to transfer, to successful transfer. It has to make students' heads spin. Related to transfer of credits, I'd like to ask you about what kinds of transfer pathways you've made use of, and how does the guaranteed transfer pathways from ODHE help you in ensuring a smooth transition? So Kim, could you address that question?
Sure. So pathways at Tracy are kind of second nature. We actually have several partners with public institutions as well as private institutions where we have pathways set up that will go from the first semester students at Tracy up to the time they graduate, and they have an idea of what it could look like once they're at that four-year school. They're definitely very helpful for our students to get an idea of how to prepare for transfer. But the other nice thing is with the Ohio Guaranteed Transfer Pathways, they are still very helpful, especially for those students who are undecided as far as what schools are looking at, and also if it's a school that we normally do not work with. Granted, many of our partner schools are in Northeastern or Northern Ohio, but if we have a student who's looking at Ohio University or University of Cincinnati, the Ohio Guaranteed Transfer Pathways still provide an opportunity for students to know what they need and to prepare for those institutions.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's such a clear answer. Next couple of questions relate to online programs. And the first question is to Rebecca. Rebecca is again working at Franklin University, and they are long accomplished in online programs. So what are the programs that you're now offering for transfer students who can only attend online, Franklin? And how do you assess your remote process that prepares for classes this spring?
So I'm not even going to name them because there's 35 programs online. But on the website, they are all listed anywhere from business to cyber to nursing. I mean, all of our students, although we're based out of Columbus, a lot of our students are from other states. So we definitely make everything available 100% online. So there's that first portion. And then, I'm sorry, can you repeat that second part?
I know I did sort of run it together. It's not, how are you assessing your remote process in order to prepare for spring? So you're not a school that had to go from face-to-face to online, but are you doing anything different related to remote hybrid orientation or recruitment post-COVID?
Sorry. The main campus in Columbus did make that transition. It probably was a little bit different than us. We have always offered our online or introductory course, which is professional foundations, in the first 6 weeks of the semester online anyways for our students here and the partner schools. But to be honest, I think it was a pretty seamless transition on main campus as well. Most often, like you mentioned previously, you know, students sometimes think, oh, I've taken orientation somewhere else. I don't need to take it again. This is a waste of my time. So for those students, I mean, I think they found that having that online and doing it was so much better and easier than they thought it would be. It's only 6 weeks, so it's pretty quick. It's not a full semester. Well, you know, it's not an 18-week course. So it does move a little bit quicker for them, which I think they appreciate.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is also related to online, and I would like to know from Allie what platforms you're using, what software you're using to engage with students online, and what are the pros and cons of these tools? Are you doing anything different now?
We are very fortunate that we have an expert in our office, a lot of programmers and systems guys that are able to really do some magic with Slate. So that's our CRM, and we've been able to do some really tailored, targeted presentations through Slate for kind of where they're at in the transfer process. So are you just looking to transfer? You're just thinking about it? Let's talk transfer basics. Okay, you're in it, you've applied, or you're planning. Let's talk next steps, and then finally kind of how to onboard you to BDSU. So it's been really helpful because that system allows us to collect all their details and be able to have really personalized follow-up conversations, which is great. But the downfall is, you know, we can do polls and we can do chats like this, but not getting to see the students has been really challenging. So I like Zoom for that. So a lot of our one-on-one appointments, if they aren't comfortable coming for our limited in-campus, on-campus options, we're able to do Zoom calls. And I love screen share. So we love being able to say, okay, where are you at? Because you're having some trouble navigating because every school looks different. So let's go through your degree audit together. And sometimes that's all they need is that reassurance that, okay, what I was looking at means this. Cool. So I will definitely say we've played around with WebEx and Zoom and Teams, and everybody has their preferences, but it's kind of where we just decide to meet the student where they're comfortable. And always good old phone calls and text messages work for us too.
That is certainly something that we should all keep in mind. What does the student like? What kind of communication does the student like? I think we'll move on to financial aid, and I will ask this question of Rebecca. Do you provide any special scholarships or financial aid for transfer students, Rebecca?
So because of the way the 3+1 program is set up, the students are technically, although I don't want to call it a discounted tuition, they're getting the community college tuition for up to 94 credits. So those first 3 years. So then the additional 30 credits that are required are at Franklin's cost. So technically overall, it is a discount. So that's kind of the the benefit of one of the perks of the program. But on our website, any student, and it doesn't matter if they're a partner student or they're a, you know, straight undergrad, 2+2, whatever it may be, we have a tab for scholarships that's updated, and students can go into it at any time and apply for any that they feel, you know, work for them. So that's the gist of it.
All righty, great. Glad that you're thinking about the financial needs of students. Next question goes to Kim Lydell. Kim, what kinds of financial aid advising do you provide prior to the transfer students' enrollment? We know that they have a lot of questions coming in and going out, so yeah.
Yes. So typically with the process as far as transferring out, and it has been mentioned in terms of helping students adjust to understand the difference in tuition at a community college and a four-year school. That's usually the big discussion that students often may not think about, but try to make sure students are aware of that information. But then also, I know meeting with students one-on-one, we will sometimes go over local scholarship resources. College Now Greater Cleveland has a lot of great resources that we use for our students, and they actually have some great scholarships that students use at Tracy. And one of the scholarships they have, they can actually can continue to use it at a four-year school once they're done at Tracy. So making sure students are aware of those type of resources, as well as the Cleveland Foundation, the local UNCF chapter here, who's really been pushing transfer to HBCUs. But then also we try to work with students as far as using FastWeb, RaiseMe, which I know is a fairly new platform, and I know we only have like 2 schools in Ohio using it, but it is a resource that many of our students who are looking out also out of state will use for scholarships. And then encouraging students join PTK if you're invited to join. Make sure you do, just because PTK has their own scholarship database. So we usually try to make sure students are aware of any and all scholarship opportunities that they can use to prepare with transfer. And of course, making sure that they're aware of how to submit their FAFSA, making sure they understand the advantage of using state aid now when they're going to a state school. So discussing all of those options with them.
That's great. So you scout out many opportunities for them, but you also teach them to continue turning over stones so that they do get the aid that they need and undoubtedly deserve. So thank you so much. We're moving on to COVID and then to transfer week, our last 2 questions. So related to COVID, tell me about your best practices that you've helped students to transition from one institution to another during the pandemic. So what are the challenges that students and staff are facing, and how do you help? Let us ask Allie that question.
Yeah, so I think it's about transparency, right? And getting these students real-time information as quickly as we can. And so our university president has been awesome about that. We have our chief health officer, Ben Beatty, and he sends a weekly email to not only our current students, but our prospective students, just so that way they have here's a look at BGSU this week and where we're at. And thankfully, every week we've been able to hear things are under control, cases on campus are decreasing. And so just so that way students know what they can expect, right? I think they really want everybody wants certainty right now. We're just not able to give that, but we can give as close as possible of here's real time what we're doing and what we're experiencing, kind of the campus climate, what you would experience. We are offering the opportunity for students to come to campus if they're comfortable, but keeping all the safety protocols in mind so that way both our campus and our visitors can be safe. So we've made a lot of adjustments, but also unique online options. So we know that they're currently in class and they may be online, but offering some evening options or some weekend or just odd times. And again, meeting the student, what time would work for you? I've got to pick up my kids and then I've got to do this. So just being able to highlight how they're going to be supported and just knowing they have options. I think that was the biggest piece for BG is you will have choices and you will still be able to have the experience that you're looking for. It's going to look a little different right now, but you are still going to be able to get involved and have the BG experience if you're looking for it.
Thank you so much. We have at North Central State dual enrollment programs called College Now and academies where students are finishing high school at the same time they're finishing their associate degrees. And for those students, the campus experience, coming to campus, that's really important. And many of the students, as you know, are being robbed of graduation exercises. So they need that validation that they are real students in the real world. So I appreciate what Bowling Green is doing. Rebecca, what kinds of things does Franklin do to help students during the pandemic, particularly the transferring students? You're muted, Rebecca. Rebecca. Oh, it's not working. I had that problem earlier. I sympathize. So we'll move on to the last question. And if you get it working, you just let me know. So the last question is related to this being Friday of National Transfer Week. So what have you done to celebrate it? And who have you collaborated with? Allie, what have you done there at Bowling Green for Transfer Week?
Well, Deb, like you said, every week is National Transfer Student Week in our worlds, but this was super fun for us because we don't get to, we're pretty humble in our office, so we don't like to brag or make all, we like got on Instagram. They had videos featuring our team, first of all, to kind of introduce what is transfer at BGSU and why is it so important to our campus community, just to get the campus awareness, involved, which was great. And then midweek, we featured our students. So you heard from Brittany Rourke on the panel earlier on Monday, but a lot of these students wanted to provide, yes, thanks Cassie from LCC. And it was just cool to share why these students still chose to transfer despite being in the middle of a pandemic. And that was really powerful, I think, for students to hear. And then celebrating with you all today has been wonderful, but I will say we've been participating with multiple community college virtual, parties and virtual fairs and sessions, and Tracy with the Flipgrid. I miss being at Tracy this week. I'm so used to hopping from each of the campuses for Grad Fest that this has been a bummer. So know that we appreciate everything you all have been doing to accommodate and allowing us to come hang out with you virtually. But we've also celebrated we have an advisory board from the community colleges across the state. So we have some surprises in the mail just to get a nice treat because we miss seeing you all in person.
Thank you so much. You excite me about celebrating it next year. Cassie, what have you been doing at Lorain?
So we we usually do a university partnership fair the week of transfer week. So we moved that virtual, and we had, different options for students to meet with different colleges, different programs, to learn more about them virtually through Zoom. And then we also highlighted a lot of our transfer students, one of them being Brittany on Wednesday, on Instagram and Facebook and everything. So we kind of celebrated our transfer students, their transfer stories throughout the week on social media, and then hosted our virtual fair. And that's how we celebrated the best we could with everything going on.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I see that Rebecca is still stuck on mute, which is a comment from, of course, the COVID age. How many times have we all heard, you're mute, turn on your microphone. And poor Rebecca can't turn hers on. Thank you, panel, for your insights and for your tips. And I wrote down so many great ideas. Now we're going to turn this over to Jonathan Wade, who will lead us through any questions that the audience has had. But I do want to appreciate you. You've just done an excellent job, and I know that you are very busy transfer specialist professionals. So, Jonathan, are you about?
Yeah, I'm right here. I'm ready to go.
There you are. Okay.
So we only have one question so far. So if you guys in the audience do have more questions for our panelists, please drop them in the chat. We'll get to them, once we get through this. So the one question so far is that it's from Robyn, actually. So can anyone share their optimal orientation success? Some flavors of that might be virtual, half day, full day, and what do you find your students want or need? So
Before you direct that to anyone, I just want to say, Jonathan, please forgive me for giving you a new last name. It's my aged and tired brain, so.
That's all right.
Jonathan Gates.
Yeah, does anyone have any that would probably be, yeah, Allie, go for it.
I'll go ahead and share. I will say BG has seen the full gamut. We've gone 180. We actually started by way back in the day sending transfers to freshman orientation and then just doing a small transfer breakout and thinking that would make them feel special. That was not great. They were really overwhelmed by the freshman orientation. They didn't see the benefit to it. They didn't want to sing the fight song and learn the hand gestures. So it was like, this is bad. So then we adapted and did our own transfer orientation, and it was a full day and it was a lot. And again, the students we would see a lot of no-shows because they just said, all I want to do is meet with my academic advisor. It's like, I get it, you just want your schedule. But so we limited then to a half day. And it just was really frustrating because we felt like we weren't serving everyone. Like we just can't, we need an a la carte buffet, right? So we asked the students and we just surveyed and said, what do you all need out of an orientation? What do you all prefer? And of course, it was a mixed bag as we expected. So we have adapted since, and we pulled together a group of campus partners and advisors and said, how can we make this work smoothly and effectively as a campus? And we've gone to what we call the transfer concierge model. And so we literally take one student at a time when they're ready, right? Because we know transfer students, some of them are, somebody said earlier, middle school, they're thinking about their plans for the future and they're ready to go and they've got their prescriptive, chart and they're just checking off and I want to do it now. Well, yeah, if we can do it early as possible, let's do it. But we know a lot of transfers wait till, later in the process to determine when they're going to make the move. So I think for us, having that individual and they're assigned to a transfer specialist based upon their major and their academic college, and we literally walk them through the steps. We just hold their hand through it. And then we offer kind of pseudo orientation optional webinars that we call onboarding sessions. So they can absolutely choose for those students, like Chaka said earlier, like they still don't know and they still need to assimilate, like what they were thinking isn't what it actually is. And they don't know where to go to find ITS help when their computer breaks down. So really being able to make sure that they have their individual needs served when they need it.
It's a great answer. Thank you. Do we have anyone from one of our community colleges that would like to answer that kind of from the 2-year perspective?
So we don't really obviously do like a transfer orientation.
Mm-hmm.
We do have students that transfer in, but they just go through a new student orientation process. For our students that are planning to transfer out, we do visit our College 101 classes. So I think that's probably the closest thing we have to orienting them to the idea of transfer out. We do a College 101 visit. All of our students who have not transferred in 12 credit hours or not taken at least 12 credit hours as CCP are required to do College 101. So we hit a good group of people and we just kind of give them the tools, make them familiar with the idea of what transfer is, what it means. And that's kind of how we orient them into the idea of transferring out.
Perfect. Thanks, Cassie. So we have another question. So if you guys have more, keep them coming, but just for now, we have one. And it was asked, how does everyone combat Zoom fatigue? So I think that that's something that we've all kind of been, Deb said it a couple of times, us in the professional roles, we're getting hit hard by it. So what is that meaning for our students and what are we doing to help? Does anyone have a good answer to that? If you do, you should publish an article because I think everyone's wondering, but yeah, does anyone, just like little things that you're doing just to make it better? Maybe you're rebranding some of your presentations to be shorter or in the form of short videos, literally just anything.
That's something that we're doing generally at North Central State College for any kind of professional development that was a whole day. It's now, a 2-hour segment. And I think that we all appreciate that. And that's what Allie was alluding to as well at Bowling Green, figuring out how much information our students need and making sure that we tailor our orientation at North Central is now virtual because it has to be virtual. And it's about an hour orientation with many videos that are pre-recorded so that the students can choose from that selection of videos. And I think that serves them well. followed, of course, by a course.
Yeah. Does anyone else have some insight on that one?
Oh, this is the $1 million question. Best I can share, and I know Allie gave us a shout out regarding it with our virtual transfer fair. And we did look at a couple of different platforms that we would do our virtual transfer fair with. But one of our transfer specialists actually said, why don't we try Flipgrid? And I think it's a little bit different from traditional Zoom where you're logging in and such, but it's an opportunity where there are just short videos, chance to really learn some good information really quickly and can connect with those individuals who post the videos very quickly. So she actually shared some data where we've had probably at least 1,000, I believe, was the last update, views as far as many of the videos on the website. So that has been a different way as far as for us to help students connect a little bit differently, and I know we've used Flipgrid for a few other items as well, through our transfer center, as well as a few other departments at the college. And we do still have appointments with students, but I know we do also provide the opportunity where we understand access wise, some students may not be able to connect via, we're a WebEx school, but then give the opportunity for students to call in, or we will call them for appointments as well, just so that they can still get the information. A lot of communication via email, text messaging. So we're trying to find a couple of different ways to make sure that we're still in contact.
Great, thank you. So we are just over an hour and we are out of questions. So I'm going to turn it back to Deb to close this out. You're muted, Deb.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. As I said, our next event, which Jonathan will join, is probably, I think somebody else will do the technical arrangements for that, November 13th, Developing High Impact Pathways. And Jonathan is the transfer enrollment specialist at Kent State. So I am just totally grateful to him, but also to you panelists, how generous of you, not us, of you to give us your time on a Friday. And I wrote so many notes. This last thing about Flipgrid, you know, our technology specialist at North Central State mentions it over and over again, but I think I'm going to bite the bullet and really learn a little more about it and incorporate it into some of the things that I do. But anyway, we all learn from one another, and that's what these panels, these sessions are all about. We're attempting, the Ohio Transfer Council is attempting to have its regular conference in June. We'll see whether that can be done. So look forward to continuing the webinars until that time, but I really appreciate all of you, and to our audience, all of you people who are also giving up an hour of your time on Friday to further the transfer mission that we all care about deeply. So thank you and have a great weekend. And I hope that you don't have too many more transfer tasks to complete this week. So thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.